Hi, in this video I'm going to continue to talk about scheduling on a job using the Job Volunteers feature that we've added to Volunteers for Salesforce. Mostly I'm going to cover some details, but also a couple of additional features. One matter I'd like to touch on is that as things stand, we cannot show the number of volunteers that are recruited for a job, and this is something we're working on. This status here, where it says one volunteer, reflects only confirmed responses. The sequence of status for a volunteer is essentially we invite the volunteer. If they respond to that email, we expect them. They're in expected status. And then after a reminder goes out, which is at some period before the event, then the response to that email is a confirmation. When they're in confirmed status, Volunteers for Salesforce recognizes that as a volunteer on the job. But the expected volunteers are not showing up here, which is less than ideal, and that is a feature that we're working on. An important aspect of scheduling that is perhaps implicit in what I've said, but is worth emphasizing, is that I do not need to depend upon automated scheduling. Can indeed change the status of participants individually. So if Hans tells me by phone that he can in fact come to this event, I do not need to wait for him to respond to the email that went out. I can just change his status manually. An important feature, which again was perhaps implied by the ability to send updates, is that one can actually cancel events. So if I navigate back to the shift, and suppose I want to, I'm going to cancel this particular shift. All I need to do is mark it as cancelled. And then, as before, nothing will happen until I publish changes. And when I publish changes, I don't have the option of deciding who the cancellation goes to. If an event is cancelled, it's cancelled for everyone. And when I send the cancellation, all the status on the volunteers is cleared, and the connection to the volunteer is broken. If I am looking at this from a volunteer's perspective, I receive an email that simply tells me about the cancellation. We also touched on the matter of reminders, and I should probably go into a little more detail on that. On a volunteer shift, you can set the number of advanced reminder days. When I create a new shift, this value is blank. Why don't I do that? No, I'm going to just change it here. And when the number is blank, the help tells you here that when you publish the shift, it picks up the default reminder days on the job. So we might routinely remind people 6 days before an event. If I publish this shift, whoops, it's still cancelled. Let's go here and uncancel it. If I publish this shift and re-invite everyone, and I look at their volunteer hours. I have to dig down into the details of the confirmation, but you can see it's now expecting to make a reminder 6 days before the shift date. So once again, that is controlled on the shift, but defaulted on the job. And you can go to the shift details, you can see it's picked up the default value then. So reminders are difficult to demonstrate because they are sent out on a scheduled basis. A scheduler runs overnight and determines that a reminder needs to go out. However, I should be able to fake this if I go to a specific volunteer and digging down into this record that you will almost never need to see, which is the confirmation I was talking about. It handles the communication with the client. I can actually pretend that I haven't already sent a message to the client today. And since the due date is in the past, if I save that record, it should decide a reminder was supposed to go out. Perhaps I will just change one more thing. As I say, this is trying to show you a message by sneaking in the back door. And it looks like it's not working. So see if I can. What the reminder looks like is something like this. It says your upcoming volunteer event, and it asks you to confirm your availability again. This is an old email, no longer linked to a live record. Once you've confirmed, your status moves from expected to confirmed. And the status stays as confirmed until the event is passed. And at that point, the scheduler again triggers the firing off of a follow-up email. The follow-up email asks you for your feedback on the event and for the number of hours you actually worked. And that number of hours is recorded and displayed in the reports that we generate. A further feature, which really is in addition to the automatic scheduling we've seen, that I can go back to a shift, and I'll just pick a shift at random. I'm on a shift that may or may not. So I have this notion of other participants in the shift. It's useful to be able to record sometimes that, say, a client was also at this event, or say it's a job fair and I want to record the fact that an employer was there, or a job seeker who wasn't a client. And to do that, I go to other participants and I select new, and I simply enter the client. In this case, the role is client. I could select a number of other roles, as you see. And when I save, the participant will appear on that other participants tab. This is a useful place also if you just want to add a volunteer one-off on a shift. There are really two situations for that. In one scenario, I have a volunteer who is not part of any active volunteering program with YJC. And what you will find is that the volunteer, you cannot add a volunteer unless they are approved in the system, but you can add inactive volunteers. So, for example, I know that this fellow here, who I'm going to add as a volunteer, is not an active volunteer. And so he is now recorded as a volunteer on this event. The other scenario is a volunteer who is an active volunteer for YJC, however, not typically involved in this job, and I just want to associate the volunteer with this one event related to this job. I believe Lee is not currently associated with this job. So once again, I'll add Lee as a volunteer. because Lee is active for YJC, you'll notice he doesn't appear in this list. Instead, if I navigate up to the job, he will have been added as a volunteer on the job. Notice he's not going to be added to new shifts. He's just been added as a job volunteer. And if I look at the specific shift, let me just navigate back so I can be sure to go to the right place. If I look at the specific shift, you will see that Lee now has a record. His status is not set, and until I have further communication with him, I will have to update it manually. A final feature I would like to talk about, again, not directly related to scheduling, but definitely related to managing volunteers on a job level. Let me just go back to the job here. So I may have many volunteers on a campaign, and on a specific job, I may only have a handful. And in Volunteers for Salesforce, there's really no convenient way to select the handful of volunteers associated with a specific job to communicate with them and only them about that job. At the campaign level, I have the ability to send a list email up here, and we now have a similar capability. It's a little less slick than in out-of-the-box Salesforce, but otherwise it would be absent completely. So if I go to a job and it has a set of associated volunteers, I can select this button, select in list, and as it tells me in the instructions, and I will now show you what that does, is to add the volunteers from that group into this list, selected volunteers. So now I have the volunteers and only the volunteers in a place where I can select them and then send a list email. That is the last feature I want to show you today. I hope these videos are useful. Bye.